From my perspective, working for Colin Powell as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, directly under the Secretary of Defense, Cheney was a darn good Secretary of Defense. In fact, probably one of the top three in the short history of that position since World War II. Cheney knew how to make a decision. He knew how to get things done. He knew exactly where to go to push the right buttons to get things done. He knew how to establish his control over the Defense Department. He fired the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, even over Colin Powell's essentially advice not to. And it didn't matter. Chief of Staff was expendable. The Air Force guy was expendable. Cheney was making a point. He was looking around for someone to fire so he could make a point. I'm in charge, boys. That was the point he wanted to make. So he didn't care whether it was the Chief of Staff of the Air Force or whatever. Before I stepped into my shoes at the State Department in 2000, as we were going through the deliberations on who would be president, I had lunch with an 80-year-old gentleman who was nonetheless extremely lucid and coherent from that time period. And this is what he said to me: beware of Donald Rumsfeld. He is an abject liar. Lying is a way of life to him. And I watched him lie to Jerry Ford and get rid of people, even cabinet officers, so he could then take their position. Be very careful around Donald Rumsfeld. He is also as smart a bureaucratic operator as I've ever seen. This was the gist of the luncheon conversation. I then said, well, what about Cheney? Cheney and Rumsfeld are linked at the hip, he said. So that was.
And who's he?
That was I won't tell you his name. I might get him in trouble. He's still alive. He's pushing 90 now. He worked for Reagan. He was in a very important position with Reagan, but he also preceded Reagan in terms of being in the White House, and a very astute Republican who nonetheless had these things to say about Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney. And from that moment on, I have to say I was on my guard. I would understand later, a year and a half later, when Rich Armitage, as Deputy Secretary of State, would refer to the Cheney office as the Gestapo, and refer to Cheney operatives like Scooter Libby and John Hanna and David Addington as the SS, as Nazis.
So who does Cheney represent? Cheney doesn't become so powerful all on his own.
No, Cheney represents, I think, first of all, a strain in American political thought that goes way back. Certainly goes back to World War II and really takes on an enormous national security dimension after World War II because of the power America had gained in that war. She was the new Rome. And because of the adversaries she confronted, ideological adversary of communism and a real adversary of the Soviet Union, country of 11 time zones, and at the end of the war, 90 to 100 divisions, which frightened the bejesus out of Europe in 1946 and 47. So Cheney is of that ilk of American politician who says, I never met a defense program I didn't like and vote for. I think that the most powerful thing America can do in the world is spread herself everywhere. And in order to do that, we must have a second to none military. I am a conservative par excellence. I'm not a neocon. I'm not a neocon. I'm what you would call a hyper-nationalist. America first, second, and third. And they are prepared, as Machiavelli wrote about in The Prince, in his more dire notes, they're prepared to do anything for that. It was no surprise to me when Ron Suskind, for example, talked about the 1% theory with Dick Cheney. If you keep 700 people in Guantanamo, 680 of which are innocent, and you've got 20 hardcore terrorists, you're doing good. If you kill 1,000 people and one of them was going to do something really bad to you, you're doing good. This is the kind of philosophy that I think Dick Cheney brought into the White House.